first off, if you'd just like to introduce yourself and then give a little description of your film.
Today, my name is Patrick Hogan. My film at the festival this year is called Killing Time. It's a kind of genre-bending horror sci-fi thriller about a woman who attracts the attention of a mysterious stranger who follows her into her house. And then she basically has to confront decisions that she made in the past in order to protect her family.
Hi, I'm Mick, Quito. I'm the director of Tahanan. I'm a producer and director based here in the Philippines. Tahanan, well, the English translation is home. It's the story about a former convict who was released back and he returns to his family. And then as he tries to assimilate back to his family, he starts to realize that this new life with his family is not what it seems to be. And then there's some, like he understands there's a little bit of disconnection between him and his son and his new family. And he tries to figure things out as he goes up, as he tries to, interact with the family and live his life with them.
Hi, I'm Jeremi Roy. I directed and wrote Soon, short film made in Montreal. My film Soon is it's just a conversation between a mother and her son. As they keep in touch, they talk about what happens in their life, and at the end of the conversation, they try to find a moment for them to see each other, and they just can't find one. That's pretty much it.
Thank you for that. But so the next question I want to get to is, why did you choose film as your medium for storytelling?
So the way I got into filmmaking and how I got into that is my way of telling stories is I was always a writer. I enjoyed writing stories even as a very, very young child. And then when I was 7, I saw Star Wars, and it blew me away. I mean, everybody there in the theater, there was a line that wrapped around the building. We'd never seen anything like it. And for me as a young kid, it just really activated my imagination. And then I got into theater at the University of Guam theater and acting and productions. And I enjoyed performing and I enjoyed writing. And I also really enjoyed, as I learned about filmmaking and the technical aspects of it. And we bought our first little, it wasn't even a camcorder. It was like a big shoulder mounted camera. And the ability to kind of use that to tell stories was fascinating to me. And so as I neared the end of high school, I started thinking about seriously pursuing being a filmmaker. And I went off to college and they were like, okay, you have to declare your major. And I said, you know what, I'm going to be a TV film major and learn film production. And I guess the rest is history.
I chose film. Well, quite honestly, I've been drawn to film for, since high school. So my form of storytelling has always been all about creating images. I do write. I'd like to say I'm like an average competent writer. Writing is difficult in itself. It's just that translating text to frames is what drives my passion. And the thing about film is that there's an opportunity for you to have the same experience when you share it with friends, families, even strangers, when you all watch together. So that's what separates it from, let's say, reading a book. You read a book and then you guys gather together and then talk about it. Film is something that you can manipulate time. You can be together with friends, and at the same time, the whole the whole experience with what you the emotional journey that you experience with what you watch is shared simultaneously with friends and families.
In my case, well, in a large sense, I've always been drawn to film too. But in the case of my film, I think it like I wrote it in two parts, and the first part is the discussion between the mother and the son, and the second part is the end of the discussion while we see their evening. They're just like he goes to work, and then goes to a bar to see friends, and she goes like grocery shopping, and then she goes to sleep. And I added the voiceover of the we hear the conversation with those images, and it's really like the second part is really cinematic, if I can say that. And the feeling I think that I was able to get with that second half of the film could only been done with cinema, with that medium. And so yeah, I don't think I could have told the same story with another medium than cinema. So I guess it really made sense with like the mise en scène and the music and the just like playing with time too and space. It was really yeah.
So what was the process behind the story, making the story for your film, and how did you decide to tell this story?
Killing Time actually had a kind of, at the end it was made very quickly, but it kind of had a long starting point. I had read an article. It's funny, what films can come from so many different, like some people make a film because they have a personal connection or it's a true story, and sometimes it can be as simple as I read an article online on a science journal, and I don't really want to talk. If I talk about it, it'll spoil the film. The twist will be spoiled. But the article was this very interesting scientific kind of hypothesis, and it sparked an idea in my head. And I was like, "Ooh, that could be a really cool story." And I hadn't seen anything quite like that idea. So I wrote a short film that I was going to do as my follow up to my last film, virtually. And I was going to film it with an actress that I knew. And then the pandemic hit. And of course, that kind of stopped everything. And there was no way we could shoot that particular script during a lockdown. It had like people going into restaurants and shops and busy streets and all that kind of thing. So as the pandemic and the quarantine kind of stretched out, my wife, who's the producer of the film, and I were thinking, well, we should still try to be active and creative and do something during this downtime that we have, because none of us were working at that point, right? I work in Hollywood and everything was shut down, and she wasn't working either. And so I circled back to that particular story, and I thought, if we re-envision this, I bet there's a way to tell this kind of same story in a different setting that would be more conducive to filming during the pandemic. So I kind of took it as a challenge. And so I rewrote the story knowing that the actors couldn't touch each other and they couldn't get close to each other, and there weren't that many actors in it. And it was filmed at a remote location where there wouldn't be people, and we could control the environment to follow all the protocols. And once we got the script done, we had some friends who he's an actor and she's a casting director and producer, and I'd always wanted to do a film with him. And I said, and they have a remote house out in the woods, and I said, hey guys, can we film at your house? I wrote a part for you so that we can work together, and it's just going to be a couple actors, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. And they read the script and they went, yeah, great. And the wife Sharon, she did the casting, she cast the other actors, and Lowell plays the dad, Harrison. and we filmed it in one weekend at their house. And from there, it was only a couple months to finish it. It's a great little film, and one of the things I really enjoy about it is it's an example of how you can do something very minimal that still has a lot of impact. You know, it's just 3 actors, none of them ever are even within touching distance of each other, except for one scene, and that particular person is wearing gloves and a mask. and we had to follow all the COVID protocols, and that's how this particular film came about.
I wrote my story because I was doing a workshop under the director Brillante Mendoza. I was doing a director workshop, and he wanted, we were brainstorming, like all the workshops, my workshop mates, we were brainstorming for ideas about stories. And a lot of our initial ideas were rejected because he was saying that it doesn't, your concept doesn't really relate to what being a Filipino is about. So because he wanted us to write a story, not just like any story, but a story about who we are. And when I came about writing that story, I thought about like what's the thing that matters the most regarding to my how I feel at the moment. And I've been actually living by myself for like at that time about 5-7 years in the Philippines. So the idea of seclusion, isolation, I mean, I do get out, but being separated from family is the thing that sort of affected me the most, because I haven't like seen my brothers, my sister, like for several years. My brother's in the United States, my sister's in Guam. So, me going through life at that point was very different when I, as opposed to me growing up, because, I was growing up with my grandmother. Like we were whole, like my family was whole when I was growing up. But then at that point, yeah, my family was separated. Also, my parents was going through a divorce. So it was that my idea of family was so different compared to me, my idea of family growing up. So it was like, it didn't make sense. And when I wrote about an ex-convict, that's the only thing that's fictional about that story. Like on my part, like of course I don't have, I don't have any friends who were incarcerated at that, because this story was like an extreme form of separation of family. So I just took a character, and then I wanted to explore what it was like to have a character be separated from family for a very, very long time. And I wanted to know what would the character do? How would the character interact after, seeing his son in quite a while? And also I wanted to know, I wanted to understand why do people, or let's say family or friends, react a certain way? Because when I was here, and when I moved from Guam to the Philippines, it was a little bit of culture shock. I couldn't quite understand the culture here in terms of how people, the social dynamics here. It was confusing. So that feeling of trying to assimilate and trying to, be part of this community was, I was the outsider. So in a way, that sort of all those experience reflected in my main character. Like he himself is an outsider of the family, trying to reintegrate back into the family, and yet there's that always disconnection, right? The family itself is whole, and yet he's the one that's not really a part of it, and not although he's the one displaying a lot of the emotion, the emotional journey, the passion about, and the love. It's the ironic thing is the family itself doesn't really reflect that sort of emotional response the same way. So it was that sort of contrast that I was really exploring. And for me, that kind of I guess that's what draw me into the story. And that's, because otherwise I wouldn't really understand how to write about an elderly man who just was released from prison. That's a very difficult thing to process. So it's just more what I wrote what I knew, and then I just put it into that character, and that's how the story came out to be.
Me, I thought about the story. Well, first it came with a very distinct emotion I felt after I encountered a friend on the street, a good friend that I like. Well, yeah, a very good friend, and it's been a long time since I saw him, and we spoke, we had the coffee together, and we really had a good time. And at the end, we were like, well, let's do something soon, and we tried to find a time, and I don't know, we were, it was just uncertain, and we didn't get to see each other soon after that encounter. And I was thinking while walking back home that it was kind of sad that I had a very good time with that friend, and I was not able to make time to see him more. And I was thinking about all these relations I have in my life, and like my parents are like in another town. It's only a 2.5 hour drive, but I don't see them that much. And it's like we're busy, but not that busy. We're both a bit lazy to like make plans to see each other. And I wanted to explore that feeling that I had while walking back home. I I thought about that whole meeting I just had. I was happy but sad at the same time, and I thought this could be a short film, to just like try to get that feeling I was living at that moment. And yeah, and it was, for me, it was not necessarily about family, the film, at first, but it gave something more dramatic to make a film about a mother and a son that are just not able to see each other because of various reasons. It was more, I think it's more compelling a bit than just like having two friends see each other and you're like, well, whatever. But a mother and a son, it's more, it's a bit deeper, I guess. So yeah, the story really came from that experience, and it's really yeah, trying to find like that little something was the essence of the project.
So what role or relationship do you see between film and then the portrayal of like family connections and disconnections?
Film is, it's really a reflection of society and a way to explore society like safely through the lens of fiction, right? You can talk about stories and really explore them, and they might be very dangerous topics or very emotional topics, but in film, we're all kind of removed a little bit because it's not our real life, right? So I think one of the great things about film is it's a way for the audience to explore how they would feel about things without actually having to go through it themselves. It can be funny, it can be thrilling, it can be sad. Any of those things, you can experience it, and it allows you to kind of, how many times have you seen a great movie and afterwards you're talking about friends, you go, wow, can you imagine if that happened to you, and I would feel this way, and I would do this and I would do that. And so you get to work through all that without actually having to necessarily, experience it. My hope is I never have to, choose, my life or my family's life, right? Like, part of this film, the idea of this film is, how far would you go to protect your family? Save your loved ones. Would you put your own life on the line, to save someone? And that's a great, topic to discuss. But I don't actually want to have to, hopefully I never have to actually put my life on the line to save my family. But through watching this movie, it would make me think about, well, how would I handle that situation? Well, how would I deal with it? There's a film that just came out called Mass, which is about parents of a killer meeting the parents of the victim. And it's a great conversation about the role of parents and what would you do if your child ended up doing something really, really horrific and bad, and how would you deal with it? And I think that's what's great about film. It allows us to have these conversations, family relationships, even in science fiction. Science fiction, I think, is great because oftentimes within science fiction, you can, in a very allegorical way, talk about societal concepts, that maybe would be too uncomfortable to talk about if it was said in the real world. The first interracial kiss in television was on Star Trek because it was in space in a different time, and you didn't have to worry about what was going on at that time in America in the 60s. So they were able to do it and kind of have those discussions, that maybe you couldn't have if it had been set, in the suburbs of, a city in middle America. So I think that's part of what I love about film.
I think a lot of us can relate to this. Growing up, we watch films with, the first thing your parents take you could be to the movies, right? So that itself is kind of rooted in that experience. I mean, of course, you have other activities, but one of the things is like, imagine my dad taking me to watch Lethal Weapon. I didn't even know what Lethal Weapon was all about. and then it's an action flick, a buddy cop action flick, and I'm like, wow, it's crazy. And then I was a kid when I watched that. I was like, what the hell's going on here? Like, there's a lot of things that as growing up, you didn't quite understand when you go into the theater. And for me, that theater experience as a child kind of like shook up my world. Like, I couldn't understand it, but I was very entertained. Like, that's the sort of feeling I would get. And I would be excited as a kid, to go to the cinemas because of that. And as I grew older, I love to go to cinema with friends. It's an experience that I want to share with people. And I think, being that cinema is part of our culture, it's part of growing up. I mean, even at home, like you even if you don't have to go to the cinema, you pop in a DVD, you go home and you watch movies there. That itself is, well, Netflix, of course. Netflix is a thing now, right? So it's anything about movies. It's like it's an experience that you go through. And I guess in terms of family, that's what I appreciate the most about having that experience to be with family, understand what my dad loves about movies, and then figure out why I love it. So I guess when I was making my film, like it wasn't I wasn't really thinking of like, hey, is this going to be in the cinema? Is this going to be out somewhere? I was really making it because it was rooted in my upbringing and experience. So, which is, I think we're going to discuss that later, right? So, my general idea about family and cinema, it's part of our culture, pop culture. we're right now we're trying to fight. Like, Hollywood is trying to fight to get back into the cinemas, right? So, and of course, when we as a filmmaker, when we make films, even short films, like I want to make a feature film someday, I would want it to be in the cinema because that's like the ultimate experience where you can be with friends and you can see it with friends and family.
I was talking with my main actor about that question, and he's for me the question I took for my film. My actor is an adopted child here, and we spoke about how like we don't see well here in Canada. There's well not Canada, but in the province of Quebec where I live, there's not many stories with just like adopted kids and families, and we don't see that often. It's like either uh, like immigrant families or white families, and there's never this. It's not portrayed that much, and for him, it was important to have to portray just like him and his white mother on the screen. And I guess cinema it's kind of stronger because you see two face together. I could like, and the movie tell you they are it's a mother and her son, and you believe it and you don't ask yourself questions. It's not like it doesn't feel like a mission in my film, but for me it was important to yeah, to portray a different kind of family that I don't get to see on the screen when I open TV here. And it was yeah, it was important for me to film a different family, different family connection. Yeah, so yeah, it's not large, but like for my film, it was that was the main goal. Well, not the main goal, but it was like yeah, that's it. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the next question I wanted to get to was, what was the biggest challenge or obstacle you guys faced in either developing the story or bringing it into film? Yeah.
COVID protocols put a time limit on how long we could film because you had to get tested. Everybody had to get tested every 3 days. And we just didn't have the money to pay for an on-set round of testing. So everybody got tested, and then boy, the clock was ticking. It was like, okay, in 2 days we have to be wrapped. So we came up with a way to shoot it that use the time most efficiently. And that was one of the challenges, was even though it's a short film, it was shot wildly out of sequence. And so keeping track of just keeping track of not only just like what wardrobe each character is wearing when and those types of things, but just like motivation, like where are we in the story and how should they be behaving at this particular point, when they have how should they be reacting to each other as we film page 10 when we haven't even filmed page 6 that sets up why they're acting that way, right? So there's a lot of talking to the actors. It's even more so in a feature film, there's even more of it, but that one of the important jobs as a director is you're communicating with the actors of how they should be performing in a scene. And so sometimes you're filming the scene where they break up and you haven't even filmed the scene yet where they met. So you have to talk to the actors and get them to that place of where what they would be feeling when they're breaking up with someone that they're in the story. They've maybe been married for 10 years, but they literally met that morning on set, right? See, that's one of the most important jobs as a director, is getting the actors into the right place so they can perform the scene, to the best of their ability. Those are all kind of tied to COVID and the logistics. I think as a director, part of it was just trying to put myself in the point of view of this mother. Something that, I kind of, as a parent, I kind of use that and stuff, but I also had to kind of spend a lot of time talking with the actors. And another challenge was we couldn't meet in person, right? Because of the lockdown. So it was over Zoom, kind of like this. So, and this is, a year ago. So I was much earlier in my Zoom savviness. So another challenge was not being able to meet in person and kind of hash things through and be able to do the things you would normally do in preparation for a film. Everything was done remotely, Zoom, sending photos, text messages, all that kind of stuff. So that was a challenge too.
The challenge would always be the budget. So, it's really, putting together, I'm sure all filmmakers know this, like when you're starting out, if you're going to make a short film, that's yours. The money comes from you or family, right? Or friends.
Yeah.
It's like, it would be great. Like if I had like an uncle who had a production company and I can borrow all his equipment, that would have been awesome. But I guess the challenge was like I only had a 5D Mark II. And after I wrote that film, I needed to assemble, of course, a team for this. And my goal in mind is to have my script made into a short film. So of course, I needed someone, like first and foremost was someone who could play this elderly person who in my story. And I wanted to get someone who I was at that time, like a couple of years ago, I wasn't quite experienced in directing, and working with actors is something new to me. So I wanted to get someone who can, who's easy to work with and would understand where I'm coming from, because sometimes talents could be difficult to work with. Thankfully I got see what's his name? Forgot my actor's name. Oh my god, what's his name in the poster? Well, anyways, I'll look up. I got him. He's from Direct Brillante recommended me to him, and then he introduced with him. I saw some of his movies growing up because he was a Filipino comedian, actually. So this was a contrast to what he's been doing. So when he came on board, I didn't know what to expect, but when he started expressing and moving in the frame of the camera, I said, okay, this looks exactly like how I envisioned the story to be. And I felt that's when everything was easier from that time, because I felt like if I couldn't get someone to emotionally portray this, I don't know how the story is gonna work. So he made my life a lot easier. So everything else just fall into place, like assembling a crew and asking for favors. So all those things was a part of assembling the short film, and of course, the will to make it happen, because when there's a lot of things that you want to shoot, but you don't get it all in the checklist, you're like, will this work out? And then somehow you just have to find a way to make it work out. I mean, I wanted to shoot inside a prison to get that feel, but I couldn't do that because it's obviously for safety reasons and of course permits. So the best thing I could do was shoot outside of it, and I was okay with that. I figured out, okay, what if he's just coming out of the prison? And that kind of like made more sense storytelling. So eventually, when you can't get everything in terms of what you envision, you creatively find ways to make the story come out. And when that happens, when you want to make it happen, you'll find a way.
In my case, I didn't really have like material obstacle. It's the film was not that well. I always write knowing I have a hard time like finding, like approaching actors and stuff like that. And for me, it's very difficult to like I knew I was not able to. I was not at the point that I didn't want to make have a big set and have a big crew. So I tried to keep it like really small, so I wouldn't have like material obstacle. But well, the biggest obstacle was trying to tell a story where not much happens and stay interesting. And so yeah, it was really the main thing. So I had to, well, think a lot about the the mise en scène and the atmosphere and all, and how I was able how to make it touching, the film, so it wouldn't be boring for people to just watch two people talking together. So that was the main thing that kept going through my mind while I was making the film is, yeah, is this boring or not? Like, what am I making right now? And I guess some people could find it boring, but I think if you're touched by it, you don't mind watching two people just speak for 5 minutes. And yeah, that was the biggest question I had while making the film.
What advice can you offer to emerging filmmakers?
Here's two pieces of advice, one kind of bigger and then one kind of very practical. Bigger, I would say, I think one of the things I see when I mentor or help younger filmmakers is they want to start by making their Star Wars, their big, amazing, personal, fantastic movie. And they don't want to start by kind of doing small things and building up their skill before they try to tackle the big one. I always say, you know, a brain surgeon doesn't start on day one by operating on a brain, right? Like they start by reading books, and then they go and they take classes, and then they operate on, they do animals, or they work on cadavers, and I mean, they build up their skills till the point where they tackle a big film. And I think it's the same with almost anything, but especially filmmaking. There's this sense that you should be an auteur and you should jump out and create a feature-length film that has all this amazing visual imagery and special effects and all this complicated stuff, and right off the bat. And then more often than not, either you never get it made, or it's not very good, it's not what you envisioned, and it's kind of demoralizing. Start small and build up your skill. Not only are you building up your skill, but you're building up your community of filmmakers and artists to help you. You need to make a big film that's complicated. You can't do it all yourself. You're going to need a cinematographer. You're going to need a production designer. You're going to need, hair and makeup. You're going to need all these different people. And the way you find these people who you can trust, if you can't just go out and, if you have the money to just hire the best people in the business, well, then that's easy, right? Then you don't have to worry about it. But more often than not, you don't have all the money in the world. And so making connections with people, helping other people on their films, having them help on your films, you build this kind of roster of people. And as you get bigger and more complex with your projects, you have these people that you can trust. Because again, if you can't pay people a ton of money, you need people who you can trust, who will commit to your project and do a great job and be dependable. And then part of that also is learning all the different positions, right? When you help other people, you're a better filmmaker if you've also done sound on a set, and you've edited someone else's project, and you've worked the camera, been the cameraman or the cinematographer, someone else. If you know all the different crafts, it makes it easier for you as a director to communicate to the crew. I always say, the job of the director is twofold. One is on set, they're the person that talks to the actors and gets the performances that you need out of the actors, which I kind of talked about earlier. The second thing is they are steering the ship. They're directing the vision of the film and making sure everybody gets on board to follow that vision. And so directors need to be able to communicate with every single person on the cast and crew about what they need to do in order to support that vision. So I always, one example I always use is a novice director who hasn't learned how to communicate would talk about the result and not what you have to do to get the result. So they would turn to the cinematographer and say, okay, for this next scene, I need it to be funny. We need to make sure this is funny. Well, that's the result. The result is when you're done with the scene, it might be funny, right? Like being funny is the result. How do you make it funny? And if you're turning to the cinematographer, saying make it funny doesn't give the cinema, he or she doesn't, like, what do you do with that, right? Like, what's funny in cinematography? Now, if you've already filmed a lot of stuff, or you've been, when you're more experienced, you'll know that drama plays here and comedy plays here. You have to see their hands and their reactions and the relationship. If a guy, slips and falls on a banana peel and you're in this kind of a shot, and you just see a guy walk along and then he disappears from frame, not funny, right? So an experienced director knows to say, okay, we need to stay wide on this shot, or I want it from the waist up, because when he bumps into the guy and there's the funny little pratfall, we need to see it. That's kind of a simplistic kind of example, but I think you get the difference between telling the cinematographer, make this funny, versus stay wide in this shot and use a 35 millimeter lens or something wide so that we catch all of the details of the interplay of the different characters in the scene, because that's what will make it funny. Or conversely, if it's dramatic, you might say, get in tight. I need to see their eyes. I need to see what's going on in their head. I can't be wide. I need to see the moment when they react to whatever dramatic moment is happening in a scene. Then the other little bit of advice, more practical, is if you have limited equipment, limited funds, start with the sound equipment. Everybody usually has a smartphone nowadays that will shoot really amazing video. Not everybody has good sound equipment. I always say, the iPhone is version 13 now. Every version they've improved the camera. The camera's gotten better for taking pictures, for video, and now they even have these cinematic modes and other things. You can shoot wide frame 4K with high definition, HDR Dolby. You have all these great video tools in the iPhone. The sound is still the same from the first iPhone. It hasn't changed. And the mark of a poor or kind of beginner or amateur film is the poor sound quality. So I always tell people, like, if you only have a $500 to get equipment and you have nothing, but you have an iPhone, I would spend the $500 to buy or rent sound gear and shoot it on your iPhone. Until you have really good sound equipment, don't worry about getting some really fancy cinema camera. And with that, when you find your locations, think about sound just as much as you think about the visual of it. It might be a great visual location, but if you can't hear the actors talking and the dialogue is going to be all covered up and muffled because of it, when people watch the film, they're not going to be thinking, oh, wow, look at that beautiful location. What they're going to be doing is, I can't hear what they're saying. Did anybody hear? What did they say? And that's what you don't want. And a lot of filmmakers come from a visual and don't think about the oral or audio component of it.
I mean, there's this saying that anyone can be a storyteller, director. That's true. I mean, now cameras, cell phones are like very accessible. Like you can come out with your cell phone and make a story. Because I used to be this techie guy. Like I'd want to get the latest camera. I want to try, and sometimes I get caught up in the technology, like thinking about that maybe if I had a Ronin stabilizer, I would be a better storyteller. That's not true. Like getting a lot of toys doesn't make you a better storyteller. And you don't get caught up in all that stuff. I mean, having those is amazing, of course, but for me, if you want to it all starts with the basics. Like, you gotta write. Like, if you can write a decent story, like even if you have doubts about whether it's nice or not, just write the story. And when you're done writing the story, then you can take that piece of paper, show it to friends. You guys like what I wrote, and doesn't matter if they like it or not. Then you take their feedback and then you rewrite it. Because once you have that paper, that's when you can take it further. Then you make that paper, that script. Then you can start thinking about everything else. Because if you're writing, if you can't write, then how can you tell a story on the film, right? On a big picture. So it's all about the basics. If you can write a story, write something you care about, something that you have an emotional connection to, you can really make something out of it, because that's what's important. Because if you don't want to write, or if you can't put it on paper, there's always going to be a disconnection. You can't connect to your audience. I feel, this is an opinion, of course, if you can't put yourself invested into a story, what more would strangers or your future audience be, right? So you have to care about the story enough that when you actually go out and make it, people would relate. Like, I didn't expect, I honestly, when I wrote this and made the short film, I did it because I wanted to. Like, I didn't actually think about, is this going to be in film festivals? Well, in the back of my mind, maybe not. But what I wanted at the time was that I wanted this the story to be made into a short film. That's all that mattered to me. And once I made it, then I started thinking about everything else. You'll find resources. Like, for me, if you have that story, and if you have that passion, and you believe this story deserves to be made into into the big screen, then you can do something about it eventually. So everything that you're going to be putting into the story is what you care about. It's kind of like your baby, right? So of course you'll do everything you can to make it happen. And of course, if once you get your script ready, I'm sure when you ask family and friends, they'll come and support you. So it's all about, for me, getting that script, getting that script that you believe in, getting it ready and out there. And once you take that step, there's no turning back, because that you believed in this story. It must happen. So all you have to do is just get that story made. That's all.
I couldn't have said it better than Mick. Though I would add, think about your mise en scène. Like, after you have your good story on your paper, think about, like, it makes a big difference on how you shoot something. And sometimes just to think more about the space and where your camera is to tell your story is it's kind of stupid, but I feel it makes all the difference when the mise en scène is well thought or not. And sometimes for me, having beautiful images is not enough. Well, not necessarily not enough. It's just that maybe your film doesn't need beautiful images. It needs something else. It's just dig deeper in the world of image as well when you shoot it. It's I don't know if that's a good advice, but yeah, think about mise en scène. That's what I would say.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I agree with, because I know what you're trying to say, the mise en scène, because you're what Jeremi's trying to say. Like, I understand. Like I think visually. So when I think of the story, I have a script and I think of the story about what I want to see on screen. I don't really think about if it's beautiful or not. I think about what serves the story the most.
Yeah.
Because if it's a graveyard scene, if it's a graveyard setup, if that serves the story, I'll go with it. Or if it's just a normal house, nothing significant, but it serves the story, that's what I'll go with. So anything that serves the story that you believe in, that's what you should go for. Don't think of all the beauty stuff or all the oh, this place looks awesome, let's use it. But if it doesn't serve the story, it's kind of useless, right? So it's all about whatever the story you're trying to tell, that's what you're trying to express. So you must use whatever the best possible choice would be, what serves the story. That's what I wanted to add.
Thank you.
All I want to say is I'm really excited to be in the festival again. I'm sorry that it can't be in person this year, but as we all know, it's a weird, unique time, and someday we'll look back, I hope, and laugh a little bit about all the craziness that we had to go through. But I'm excited to be a part of the festival again this year, and I'm always excited to see, every year that I look into the festival, and every time I'm back, I see more filmmakers, more amazing films coming from Guam. And it's the kind of thing, when I was a kid, you didn't have that opportunity. You had to move somewhere like here to do it, and now you don't, because great films are being made there, and that's really exciting. So I look forward to this year and many years in the future, I hope, to be part of the festival. Sizus Maasi, Guam International Film Festival. Viva Guahan. GCC Class of 88.
Thank you, Guam International Film Festival.
Thank you, Guam. Thank you, Guam International Film Festival.